Hey everyone, how's it going? Forrest here, again with another installment, my complete analysis of all of J.S. Bach's chorale harmonizations. Today we're looking at Was mein Gott will, das geschehe allzeit, which translates to what my God wants, may it always happen. This is a very dense chorale, but for all intents and purposes, it's very harmonically functional. Really not too much to comment on besides the fact I'll talk about the little harmonic intricacies as we get to them, but no themes that I want you to keep in mind as we're analyzing. It's fairly straightforward. So 2 sharps in the key signature. We start on B minor. We end on B major. You would think we were in the key of B minor. However, I believe we are in the key of D major to start things off, and this is a 6 chord with a passing tone in the melody. We then have F sharp, A, D, and A. That's D major over F sharp, which is 1/6. We then have G, G, D, and B. That's G major, which is our 4 chord. And then we have D, F sharp, D, and A, our tonic triad in root position. Passing tones in the lower voices. And then we have F sharp, A, D, and D, our tonic triad in first inversion. We have 3 passing tones, including the bass on this beat here, or this and, which spells out G sharp, B, E, and D. That is, or sorry, not G sharp, G natural, G, B, E, and D, which is E minor 7 over G, which is a 2/6/5 chord. As we're getting close to the cadence, I would expect a chord like this, so we will analyze it as a passing chord. We then have A, F sharp, and D. This G is a passing tone. This is D major over A, which is 1/6/4. And then we get A, E, A, and C sharp. That is our 5 chord, A major, 1/6/4 going to 5. Very normative cadential progression. And then we get D, F sharp, A, and D, which is our tonic triad in root position. Perfect authentic cadence. Okay, looking ahead, we have a perfect authentic cadence in the key of B minor. We're looking for a point on which we modulate. However, I see some parallels between this phrase and this phrase here, especially what's going on here at the latter half of the first complete measure. So I think we modulate somewhere in and around this stepwise motion here in the bass, but until then we're still in the key of D major. Here we have B, E, G sharp, and D. That's E major over B, which is 5/4/3 of 5, because E is the dominant of A, and A is our 5 chord. We then have A, E, A, and C sharp, which is our 5 chord. We also have, actually, that D is a neighboring 7th, but it's a chord tone because this is an E7 chord, so we will not mark it. We have another passing tone here in the tenor before we get E, G natural, and B, which is E minor in root position. That is our 2 chord. A bit of a transitive progression here. 2 typically goes to 5, but here we see 5 going to 2. Passing tones in the alto and the bass before we get G, G, B, and E. That is E minor in first inversion, so we'll just change the figured bass. And this is where I believe we modulate to the key of B minor. This is now 4/6. We have a passing tone in the bass as well before we get B, F sharp, B, and D, which is our tonic triad in root position, B minor. We have an anticipation in the melody as well before we get E, G, B, and C sharp. This is C sharp minor 7 flat 5, which is 2/6/5. Bach loves 2/6/5 chords in cadential situations, just like how we saw one here. And then we get 5, F sharp, A sharp, and C sharp. That's F sharp major in this case. We have a passing 7th in the tenor. And then we have B minor, B, D, F sharp, and B, which is our tonic triad in root position. Perfect authentic cadence. Okay, looking ahead, we have a perfect authentic cadence again, but this time we're in the key of A major. So unlike this phrase here where we modulate to B minor towards the end, I reckon we modulate right at the beginning of the phrase here. We have B, D, F sharp, and B, which is B minor again. We don't need to reanalyze in the key of B minor, but in the key of A major, this is our 2 chord. We also have a passing 7th in the bass and a passing tone in the tenor as well before we get G sharp, B, E, and D. This is E major over G sharp. That's 5/6. We have some passing tones in the alto and the bass again as well before we get E, E, G sharp, and B. That's just taking our E major chord and putting it in root position, so we'll just change the figured bass. Passing 7th in the tenor, and then we get E sharp, C sharp, G, and C sharp with a passing 7th in the melody. This is C sharp major over E sharp. That is 5/6 of 5, another 5 of 5 chord. C sharp is the dominant of F sharp, and F sharp is not our 5. Apologies, it is our 6. And then we get F sharp afterwards. F sharp, C sharp, F sharp, and A, which is our submediate with a passing 7th in the bass. We then get D sharp, B, F sharp, and A, which is B7 over D sharp. This is 5/6 of 5. And then we get E, C sharp, E, and G sharp. However, I reckon this C sharp is an accented non-chord tone, and really what we're looking at here is E, D, E, and G sharp, which is 5/7. And then we're going to cadence on A major, A, C sharp, E, and A. Remember this cadence actually because we're going to see it at the end of the chorale in a similar fashion. At least the harmonic progression is somewhat similar. Okay, looking ahead, we have a phrase that ends in a half cadence in the key of B minor. It's our only non-perfect authentic cadence in the entire chorale, which is kind of interesting. Typically we see a little bit more variety, like the perfect authentic cadence is probably the most common cadence we see, followed by the half cadence, but to see as many oh goodness, that's a tongue twister, as many perfect authentic cadences in succession is kind of an interesting grammatical statement, because the perfect authentic cadence is kind of like a period as far as grammar is concerned, or as far as punctuation is concerned. It's like its own succinct idea. It stands on its own, and it's a series of strung together standalone ideas, which typically Bach, I feel like, is more in favor of compound phrases or sections where there is what's the word? An antecedent and a consequent. That's sort of how I see it in the majority of cases, but here we are. I guess one could make the argument that D major is somehow antecedent to B minor, because I would argue the entire tonality of the chorale is B minor, despite starting in the key of D major. They are they both share a pitch collection. They're diatonic to one another if you don't make any chromatic alterations to B minor, but still, yeah, I'd say that that's really the only sort of antecedent quality about this phrase in D major. The fact that they're both perfect authentic cadences kind of lends itself to make them feel like simple phrases, which is fine. It's not unprecedented, but it's less common than a varied cadence map across the chorale. So we're going to start analyzing in the key of B minor right off the bat, I believe. We have D, D, F, and A, or F sharp rather, and A, which is D major. That is our 4 chord in the key of A major. And in the key of B minor, it's our 3 chord. We then immediately go into melodic minor ascending here in the key of B minor and the bass here. So we have G sharp, B, F, and D, which is F sharp again. Sorry, I forgot the F sharp. I'm not reading the key signature. G sharp, D, F sharp, and B, which is G sharp minor 7 flat 5. That is 6 half diminished. And remember, this is not a secondary dominant. This isn't 7 7 of 7. This is melodic minor harmonization here. This E's in anticipation, this C sharp's in anticipation. If you looked at these notes as our chords, we would have a 2-4-3 chord as well, and I think they both function the same way, 6 and 2-4-3. However, with a 7 chord on the other side of it, 2 going to 7 is not a progression we see very often. It's kind of the weakest of predominant to dominant progressions due to the third relationship between the chords. We have an A sharp, C sharp, E, and C sharp here with 2 anticipations, both in the inner voices. This is A sharp diminished in root position, which is a 7 chord. And then we go to B minor, B, B, D, and D, an interesting 2 root, 2/3 progression, or tonic triad in the key of B minor. Anticipatory 7th here in the tenor before we get C sharp, A sharp, E, and C sharp with a passing 7th here in the tenor. This is a 7/6 chord, A sharp diminished over C sharp. And we get B minor in first inversion, D, F sharp, and B, 1/6, 1/7, 6, 1/6, very common progression in Bach, or the inverse. 16761 as well is very common. But afterwards we get this B is a chord tone, so we don't need to mark it. We have B, D, G sharp, and B. I think this is one of those chords where we sort of have to take the aggregate of everything that's going on. We have E sharp, we have G sharp, we have B, and we have D. So I feel like this is some type of secondary dominant here. This is E sharp diminished for sure, and it's a fully diminished 7th chord because this is D natural, and we have E sharp, which is an interval of a diminished 7th. So that would be over the 5th of the chord, 7, 4, 3 of 5, because E sharp is the leading tone to F sharp, and F sharp is our dominant in the key of B minor, and that's what we get at our half cadence: F sharp, A sharp, F sharp, and C sharp. Okay, looking ahead, we are actually moving briefly to the key of F sharp minor before we end our phrase in the key of D major. So this fragment here, B, A, G sharp, F sharp, feels so much like F sharp minor that I feel like Bach goes to F sharp minor briefly. I think there's an argument to be made that we stay in B minor, and these F sharps are just minor dominant chords, but it just sounds too much like F sharp minor for me between the agreement in the bass and the melody for it to be a coincidence. So we start things off with a tonic triad here with B minor and a passing tone in the melody, similar to how we start the chorale off actually. It's almost the exact same chord, but this is where we move to F sharp minor briefly as well. This B minor is now our 4 chord. Then we have A, C sharp, F sharp, and A, which is our tonic triad and first inversion, F sharp minor over A. We then get G sharp, D, F sharp, and B. We could make an argument that this is G sharp minor 7 flat 5, but I think it's more likely that this F sharp is kind of functioning like a 7/6 suspension or an accented non-chord tone at least, and this is actually E sharp, G sharp, B, and B. So or with the D as well, we could have a similar situation that we had here where we're taking the aggregate of the notes that are happening on this beat. In fact, actually these are very similar chords to one another, so I will call this 7, not 4/3, but 7 6 5 of, oh no, this is just 7 6 5. This is not a secondary dominant because we're in the key of F sharp. Apologies. And then we go to F sharp, C sharp, F sharp, and A, our tonic triad in root position again. 1 6 7 6 1 or 7 6 5. Most of the time it's a 7 chord, just a regular old triad. But sometimes we get a what is the word? A variation that includes a 7th as well. That really doesn't change the structure of the chord progression. Okay, moving ahead, we have B minor, B, D, F sharp, and D. That's our 4 chord in root position, and I think this is where we move to the key of D major as well. B minor becomes our 6 chord, passing 7th in the bass and passing tone in the tenor as well before we get G sharp, B, E, and D. This is E7 over G sharp. That's 5 6 5 of 5. We've seen this chord quite a few times in cadential situations, or we've seen 5 of 5 a lot. We've also seen 5 6 of 5 in a cadential situation as well. In fact, the majority of our cadences have had some type of secondary dominant as part of the final 3 beats of the cadence, which I tend to lump together these 3 chords as the cadence. Some people just stop at 2. I feel like the definition for the cadence stops at 2, but really the cadence as the big picture is sometimes 3 or even 4 beats ahead of the fermata. But after our 5 6 of 5, we do get 5. Similar to what's happening here, we get 5 7 because we have this accented non-chord tone here. A, G, and C sharp. That's A7 in root position, and then we cadence on D major, D, A, F sharp, and D, which is our tonic triad in root position. And as we're closing in on our final cadence, we end the chorale with a perfect authentic cadence in the key of B minor, but we get there through what I'm saying is A major. This melody, the same way that we go through F minor here to get to D major, it really feels like this melody with the bass is also in the key of A major. So starting things off, we have F sharp, A, and D. That is D major over F sharp, which is not our 4 chord yet. Apologies, I was getting ahead of myself. That is 1 6, but also in the key of A major. it is 4/6. And we also have some passing tones going on in the lower voices, G sharp, B, F sharp, and D. That is G sharp minor 7 flat 5 or 7/7 in the key of A major, so 4 going to 7. One of the most common subdivided chord progressions in all of the chorales that takes a cadential progression or a predominant dominant progression and spans it over the course of one beat. Very, very common. We see it all the time. And then we have A, C sharp, E, and C sharp, which is our tonic triad and root position. And then we have some passing tones going on the inner voices here. We have A, D sharp, F sharp, and C. That is D sharp, C sharp, apologies. This is D sharp minor 7 flat 5 over A. So we do have a passing secondary dominant. This is 7/4/3 of 5, or you could even just say 7 of 5, because if you feel like this bass is functioning like a pedal, that's really all that matters. But after our 7/4/3 of 5, we do go to 5, G sharp, E, G sharp, and B, more specifically 5/6. However, Bach is using a device that we've seen a couple of times in the chorale, where he uses the dominant of one key and turns it into the major subdominant of a tonic minor key, which is really interesting because Bach uses harmonic minor by proxy of using melodic minor all the time. And when we see the 4, the 5 and the 4 are diatonic to one another when you compare a minor key and the key of its subtonic. So in this case, A major and B minor both share a 5 and a 4 if you so choose to spell the minor scale with the raised 6th scale degree. So that's a really interesting way that Bach chooses to modulate between keys that are adjacent to one another, not on the circle of fifths, but adjacent in terms of their tonic. We also have a passing tone here in the alto, leaving us with, that's not a chord, A sharp, B, G sharp, and E, some type of like a sus chord or something, a diminished sus chord. Not something we would analyze. A little too hip for Bach. But then afterwards we get an interesting chord. We have G, B, B, and E. I'm calling this E minor in first inversion 4/6, so we're seeing direct cross relations here where the just the quality of the triad is being changed from major to minor. We know that with Bach when he uses chromaticism and he creates long lines of descending or ascending notes that are chromatically adjacent to one another. The chord progressions are usually at their least functional. He's usually just trying to find chords that fit the contour of the bass line, which in this case it's not always seamless in terms of creating a normative harmonic narrative. So in this case we see just two chords that are adjacent to one another, or not even necessarily adjacent to one another, but they share a root but are different qualities. And I think that that's really interesting. I think there's also an argument to be made that if you look at this C sharp, I think we saw this as well earlier, if you look at this C sharp, instead of this being a 4/6 chord, you could make the argument that this is a 2/4/3 chord. But if you've watched any of my past videos that have had a moment about me talking about this, 4/6 and 2/4/3 are often seen with one another, especially in cadential situations. But I've found that 4/6 and 2/4/3 usually, if 2/4/3 can be extrapolated from the texture, so can 4/6, and it usually, in my opinion, is a 4/6 chord at the end of the day. But ultimately speaking, both chords achieve the same goal. They're both predominant in some fashion, and I'm more in favor of analyzing them as 4/6. Especially in this case, I feel like major 4 going to minor 4 is what creates the very angular and just this sharp juxtaposition that Bach is using. I guess I need to be more careful with my terminology, using the term sharp. This angular is kind of what I was trying to, at the end of the day, articulate with that statement. The idea that the chords don't coalesce. They are next to one another. They are being juxtaposed because they are next to one another, but there is an intentional lack of fitting together, and I think that's probably the point that Bach's trying to make. But moving ahead, we get F sharp, D, B, and D, which is B minor in first inversion. And then we get an interesting thing going on here after this anticipation in the melody. We have E sharp, G sharp, B, and C sharp, which is C sharp 7 over E sharp. That's 5, 6, 5 of 5, because C sharp's the dominant of F sharp. And then we get our 5 chord, F sharp, C sharp, A sharp, and C sharp. That is our 5 chord. And we have this interrupted 1, 6, 4 going to 5. Sometimes we see Bach do this with 4 chords. Sometimes we see him do it with secondary dominance. Sometimes we see him do it with 2 chords, where the relationship between the 1, 6, 4 and the 5 are broken by some type of lower neighbor or upper neighbor. I don't remember any cases where we have an upper neighbor, but here we have a lower neighbor. This is something that we've seen Bach done on a couple of occasions, so it's maybe it is conventional. I haven't analyzed all the chorales yet, but he's done it enough times for it to be something that is maybe not necessarily a hallmark, but not something to be surprised by. But regardless, yeah, I still think the 1, 6, 4 and the 5 are connected to one another, just interrupted. And then we have our tonic triad in a major configuration, B, D sharp, F sharp, and B. Bach often ends his minor chorales. Maybe, no, he doesn't always, but virtually always he ends his minor chorales with a perfect authentic cadence where the final triad uses the Picardy third, and I imagine he just wants to end the movement on a more uplifting, in a more uplifting fashion. But also, I think also just major chords, he probably had a different relationship with major chords, and major chords just have a stronger sense of conviction. So I think there's lots to speculate about there. There's probably writing about it that I'm not aware of, but I'm going to wrap up the video on those last remarks. All in all, lots of chords to unpack in this particular chorale, lots of secondary dominance, lots of modulations, but all in all, functionally harmonic. There weren't really any chords that threw me for a loop or any chords that I feel particularly confused about. I'm very solid with this analysis, and I am happy that this chorale, despite how dense it was straightforward. So if you're interested in following me along on this journey to analyze all of Bach's chorale harmonizations, feel free to subscribe to the channel, hit the notification icon, like the video. You know the drill. I would be very happy to have you along on the journey, and there are tons of videos to be published in the future. And when you hit the notification icon, you will be notified of when my daily upload goes live. So if you'd like your daily dose of Bach or your daily fix of analysis, you can get them both here in the same place, and it would support me as well, which I am very appreciative of. So again, thank you so much for watching the video and supporting the channel by doing so. I look forward to tomorrow's analysis, and I hope you take care.